Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the SE Etc. series. I'm Chris Hadnagy, CEO and founder of Social-Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since back in 2009, and this is episode 232. And because it is the dumpster dive, my buddy in the dumpster with me is none other than Patrick Laverty. Patrick, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me here. It's so great to always join you on these. As you said, my name is Patrick Laverty. I'm the senior team lead here at Social Engineer, where I get to work with an incredible team of other professional and certified and ethical social engineers doing all kinds of engagements between our phishing, our vishing, our smishing, our impersonatishing. We do lots of kind of fun stuff, but we'll talk about some of those later.
I think we should actually start that, impersonate-tishing.
We should.
Someone made up vishing. Someone made up phishing. Someone made up smishing, right? Why don't we just be the one, right?
Let's do it. Impersonate-tishing. I'm going to go create a Wikipedia page now.
Yeah, there it is. Because that makes everything real. Okay.
It's on the internet.
As always, the sponsor for this episode is our company, Social-Engineer LLC. A couple great things happening. We are about to launch some pre-sales for our very first very first audio course on information elicitation. Really excited about that. Dr. Abby and myself have been working on that for a while. It's really good information. It's about 4 hours long. If you don't take the cert with it, and if you want the cert, there'll be some information on the website. You can check that at social-engineer.com, along with all of our 2024 training schedule. All of the beautiful dates are up there. You can spend time with Patrick in the practical class, or you can spend time with me in the foundational class, and you can pick the dates, times, locations that you want, and find all of that also on the website. Okay, a couple other things. If you really love the topic of social engineering, or you just want to hang out with Patrick more, because who doesn't, then you should come over to the Slack channel. And if you can't find it in the show notes, the link, just hit up Patrick or I on LinkedIn or another social media, and we'll get you the link over to that. There's about 1,500 people in there now every day talking about social engineering, discussing all aspects of it, even finding employment in the field, because we have a job board and they post jobs, and they also post when they're looking for work. So you can hop on over to that and enjoy a nice family-friendly legal chat about social engineering. If that sounds like you, come on in. I want to invite everyone to visit innocentlivesfoundation.org. If you're not familiar with our mission there, we have a nonprofit that started 6 years ago. 6 years ago. I can't believe that. And we work closely with law enforcement to help geolocate and stop and track people who traffic children and who create child abuse material. In the 6 years, we've hit 500 cases now that we've handed into law enforcement. I'm just so proud of what we're doing over there at that team, and our team there. And if you want to support us, you can do so by volunteering, or you can give us donations if you would like. And you can find out more information on innocentlivesfoundation.org. And if you like the music in this podcast, the intro and outro, it is none other than Clutch, the best rock and roll band on the planet Earth. Neil Fallon was a big supporter of ILF, and of course we love them, but I've loved them way before that. They're just a great band, and I've been listening to them forever. So they're gracious enough to let us use their music here in the show. And last but not least, if you like the topics that we have, or you have other topics you would like to hear, or you just want to give us general comments, you want to tell us something we can improve, do it all down in the comments below. But while you're heading down there, hit the thumbs up and like, because that helps us spread our message even further. So you can find us on almost any platform that you listen to podcasts on. We appreciate all your support and good ideas. Talking of ideas, Patrick, what is our topic that you never ever announce to anybody beforehand that we are talking about today, which is annoying, but okay, we'll go with it.
All right. But first, before we even get to that, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So last month, there was the ILF Gala in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
On September 23rd. It
was.
Who was there, and what type of thing was that all about? If people want to maybe go to it next year.
I think they should. So we had LeVar Burton as our host, which was pretty dang awesome. He's just an amazing human being. And then we had a band called the Action Figures, which I'm sad to say I never heard of them before until we started looking around, and one of our other board members knew them. And these are all actors from like Star Wars, The Heroes, different TV shows that are all musicians in addition to being actors. So they get together and they put on these great little musical gigs, and they're really, really cool. In addition, we had a bunch of really great artists out there. It was a great time. Burbank, it's a beautiful location there at Castaways, much cooler than it was here in Orlando. So
excellent.
It was a great time. So yeah, we will be announcing next year's date soon. Excellent. And planning for that. So we're going to give everyone a save the date way earlier than we did this time. We're learning from our mistakes and we're going to not duplicate them. Cool. But a great time and really great support for ILF out there.
So that was a great time. I think one of the topics that we wanted to talk about is somebody that's not having a great time. This isn't even the topic of this whole episode, is the MGM Caesars people, where all the reports that we're seeing indicate that social engineering was a large part of that, where it seems like there was phone calls that went into the service desk. And I think you even wrote up a blog post on LinkedIn about it.
Yeah.
What sorts of lessons have we seen, or based on the information, since you and I are not privy to specific details, we haven't been in touch with anybody from MGM or Caesars. So really, all we have to go on is what we see in the news like anybody else. But based on that, what were your thoughts there?
Well, it's not shocking to us, of course, when you and I talked about it because of what we do for a living. But I still think you see shock and awe because it's one phone call, right? They did some OSINT. They found their target. They found all the information on their target, called the target, got them to install some ransomware, and then took over the network and issued a $30 million ransom, which Caesars did not pay, and they only paid $15 million from what I heard last.
Only,
and I don't remember the total, but they're down for days, just days and days and days. I mean, and when we say down, like nothing is working. The ATMs don't work. Casinos are down. The slot machines are down. The ordering system. I mean, they are down. I can't even imagine the cost financially to a company like that. They make I think I heard $14.1 billion a year, and they're down.
Wow.
A phone call.
Right. But one of the issues that I think I have with that is the way that it's portrayed is like it was just a phone call. But
it's not.
Would you say that it is literally anybody that can make that phone call and do the kind of damage, or does it really require a degree of training and understanding to be able to pull off that kind of phone call in order for the people on the other side to actually fall for it? And also, I'm guessing that after this, there's going to be other companies that say, I haven't really heard of phishing before. I need to be tested. I need to do training. What sorts of things should we be thinking about if we want to be trained and tested against this type of attack?
Yeah, well, your first question is a good one. I mean, in the criminal organizations, I don't know how they get training besides practice. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you like a two-part answer. I think when it comes to the phishing call, anybody who's got enough courage just to make the call and talk could get that part. But it's not like, say, that anybody on the street can just pick up the phone and vish Caesars or MGM and, make $15 million tomorrow. They had to go and find an exploit that they know would work on that network, right? So they probably were doing research into that network for a long time, scanning it, looking for open ports, finding what sort of software is on there, finding, okay, is that software vulnerable? Then going to the dark web markets and saying, does anyone have any exploits for this kind of a thing? And then from what I read, and again, I don't know if this is true, but what I read is that that's the way that this group works is they do that research. They go and they buy an exploit or, get an exploit from someone that works on that network. And then that's the way they use phishing to institute it. So, I wouldn't say that there's no skill involved in this. There has to be skill, right? So it's not, I don't think you can just say, well, tomorrow I'm going to start doing phishing for a living and then you're going to, make $15 million. That's not going to happen. They had to understand a lot. And then after all of that, they had to go do OSINT then on their target. So it's not just network research and then exploits. It's now knowing how to do OSINT on the target and how to catalog that OSINT and then how to use the OSINT that they found in the phishing call to perform the attack.
Yeah, there's certainly going to be some skills going to be involved because we have also seen times when companies will come to us and want to hire us for our services and then say, you know what, never mind, we'll just use our own people for it. And then a few months later, they come back and say, okay, that's a lot harder than we thought it was going to be. There's a lot more to it. So for that level of attack, there probably is going to be a level of understanding of a lot of the techniques and ways that these things get done, which that's one of the fun things that I get to do in my job is I get to work with this team that gets to do all those types of things and tries to think their way around all the different objections and be able to think on the fly. So that's a whole lot of fun.
And I would say, there's some vishing that we've heard and seen, like the big one I think of is like Toyota, or let's talk about the Twitter one. That's more recent. That there was no technical exploit there, right? He called and he was given access to the database that allowed the attacker to then change the passwords for those big prolific Twitter accounts and ask cryptocurrency, right? Ask for donations. Yep. So that was all social engineering. Now, I still wouldn't say that was skillless because that person had to they had to think on their feet, like you just said, pivot, move, ask questions, quickly divert, and they had to, have access to that database, get the access to log in. So there was, I think there's skill in all of it when we talk about social engineering. It just, depending on the nature of the end of the attack, will it just be human skill or will it be human and technical skill? Right.
Yeah. So pivoting from the idea of people looking for training, looking for testing, the idea that we had for this month is there's been lots of times at various conferences where I see people give presentations on how to get ready for a pen test, or as we refer to it as an adversary simulation. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that presentation multiple times, and it's often very helpful information. But one that we don't see, or at least I haven't seen very often, is how should a company really get ready for an on-site impersonation adversary simulation?
I don't know if it's going to stick. I don't know if it's
yeah. So basically, so people can understand what we're referring to is this is really going to be like a actual physical break-in. Can people get past your front door security and get into sensitive areas of the company? And I don't know that lots of places really think about that too much. So I thought we could talk a little bit about what are ways that companies can prepare for this type of on-site adversary simulation. So what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I think it's a good one. I think it could help a lot of companies, especially if they're considering having a red team or a physical SE test, then being able to know what to prepare for and how to do it. That could be really helpful.
And you just mentioned red team. Would this also be a good thing for purple teaming? And what would really be the difference there between a red team and a purple team in this context?
Yeah, I mean, these phrases get thrown out a lot, and they keep changing and colors keep changing and things like that. But it's really just a matter of, like in the adversarial simulation world, we use the like black box as a phrase, and that means like nothing is told. So you're red teaming. And this may not be a definition that everyone uses, but here at SE, when we think about red teaming, we say red teaming is like at night, you're physically breaking in, you can pick locks, jump fences, do whatever you want to do, that kind of thing to get into the building. Whereas an SE teaming would be the daytime stuff where we walk up to the security guard and try to talk our way in. We're generally not hopping fences or jumping through windows or things like that. So, my understanding with the purple team is like, hey, we got this, blend between the offensive and defensive sides of the company. And, what balance do you want to use there in this test? So, I think all of them have similar ways to prep, especially when it comes to being physically on site, because when you're physically on site doing something that you should not do and being someone that you are not, then there's some risk.
Yep. So before we talk about how the actual target or client can prepare, just kind of briefly, can you mention how much prep do we do? How much prep do you do as a team? Because we don't just show up on the first day and figure, well, I think we have the right address. That's the name on the building. Let's see if we can get in. How much prep do you do before you even arrive on site?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, right? I mean, you know this. We've done a couple together, and I think it's important to start even before that stage to say, like, prep with the client is you got to find out what's in scope and what's not, right? You got to find out, okay, am I allowed to go in at night and daytime? Are your guards armed? What kind of security do you have? Do you have a tie-in with the local police? There's so many things that have to be considered and asked, and then that has to be documented, because the one thing you're going to really desperately need is to get a jail-free letter. And that letter should on there list what things you are allowed to do and what areas you're allowed to access. And this is way before you're even going on site, right? So we're not even talking about the job yet. We're just saying the preparation. And this is a great time for the client to really start thinking about all of that, right? They start sitting back going, oh yeah, wait, what do I want them to do? And oh yeah, we don't want them to go there. No, actually, I don't want you to pick locks. And you have to go through all of this. This is a moment for you as the consultant to kind of walk the client through thinking, okay, what parts of this kind of a test do you want? I've had companies before call and say, yeah, we definitely want like this red team, SE teaming thing. Great. Okay. So what about nighttime entry? Oh, well, no, I don't know if I want that. And okay. Well, when if we're going nighttime entry, how are we going to breach the doors? Can we pick the lock? Oh, well, I didn't think about that. Right? And you're sitting there and all of a sudden you see them going, really? Okay. Give me the whole rundown. And then I need to see what I get approved. And the last thing you'd want to do is be like, yeah, they signed a contract for a red team and I know what that means. So you show up on site and start picking locks and hopping walls and breaking things. And then they're like, what the heck? I didn't agree to that. So you got to that's the first stage. Get that all done.
You certainly have to get through that with the client, but I would imagine there's also lots of times where they're on the other side of that, where they're like, yeah, do whatever you want because the bad guys are going to which, one of the things that I like to sometimes ask is take it to a ridiculous extreme. Like, can I take a backhoe to your building and cut a hole in the back of the building? No, of course not.
No,
that's taking it a little bit too far. So let's back up from there. And we probably want something non-destructive, or certainly not that destructive, because we know that picking a lock could potentially damage the lock. So that would count as destructive. We probably don't want to throw a brick through a window or anything like that. So this is probably another area where the client could be on the other end of the extreme and say, do whatever the bad guys would do. And let's walk this back a little bit. And have you had times where clients will ask you about that?
Yeah. And I love your analogy, because we do get those where people are like, of course, do anything. And then you do have to throw something out a little ridiculous, like, well, yeah, the bad guys will also, exploit you and your family. There has to be an ethical and moral line, even if you are simulating the adversary, right? So I think it is important that we walk the client through all of that. And then, sometimes we get that started, but once we're not even going on site yet, because everything will start with OSINT. And once we start doing OSINT, we may come up with other ideas that we want to throw at them. Like, we didn't know that you had this whole area over here that seems unprotected by cameras. Like, can we breach that fence? Can we do those things? So once you're doing your OSINT and developing your, plan of attack, that's when you start going back to the client and you could say, hey, we have another idea. We saw another vector that we're thinking, can this be approved? And you'll have more and more planning. And again, that's way before you even get on site. Because the OSINT will determine things like, okay, what do I need to bring costumes? What's my pretext? What tools are we going to need? There's no sense in bringing a giant Pelican case of tools like, RFID. They don't use that, or, don't need to bring all your lock tools if they're not allowing lock picking. So there's, you have to kind of plan your suitcase based on the OSINT and what's allowed.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about what types of things that the client should be thinking about, because you're going to be thinking about it as well. For example, I remember you've told a story where you and Ryan showed up to a location as bug exterminators. And I'm guessing you were walking around the building and looking to check doors and looking for unlocked doors. So I'm guessing unlocked doors is something that they should think about, and whether doors are properly closing and locking. And you want to take it from there?
I think for the client beforehand, I think afterwards, right? Because you're not going to tell them, hey, why don't you go around your building right now and see how many unlocked doors you have, right? That's the reason they're hiring us, to see if someone would actually leave a door unlocked. I think for us, it's more like once let's say we find that, what Ryan and I were finding that, and we're looking for that, and now we find one, and that's our access in. Then our job is to kind of help the client see, well, what protocol wasn't put in place that door was allowed to be left unlocked. Like, do you not have like auto door closers that close an open door and then lock it? And if you do, then did someone put a peg there? Right? There's all these things that we need to determine as the consultant before we can walk the client through. I mean, really at the beginning stages, and at least, we could differ, in opinion. But in the beginning stages, the client doesn't need to think through all that. They just need to think, what are we allowed to do? And what are we not allowed to do? What do they want? What do they want us to test? Mm-hmm. Right. And then, I use the analogy of thinking you go to a doctor and, you have to get some blood work done. Well, the doctor puts the specific things they're looking for on the lab sheet, and they don't test everything. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just because you're going to get a blood test doesn't mean they're going to test for cancer. They have to put that on the lab sheet. So our lab sheet is our scope. Client tells us, here's what I want you to check. And that's what we check.
So also, should the client inform the company, the people, the employees that this test is coming? And what level of information should they give the people about that?
I have like two differing opinions. I don't mind when a client tells the company that, hey, we're working with this company. We're going to start doing some security auditing that may include things like phishing, vishing, physical entry of the building, so be vigilant. What I don't like is when they say this month, there's going to be a couple guys breaking in the building, right? Like now everyone's on high alert. You're not really testing if they're thinking securely. So, that's why I have a dual thought on it. I don't mind if they want to warn and give their people a heads up. But I also think that the more realistic thing is to go cold, because that's what a bad guy does. He doesn't call up first and say, by the way, sometime in the next year, I'm going to probably try to hack you. He just does it. So if you really want a true test, it should be as minimal people as possible that know, but especially because we're talking about physical, there better be some higher ups in the know. So that way, if anything goes awry, you have someone to call right away and get that fixed, because you do not want to be out there with no contact, nobody to contact, or your one contact decided that was his vacation week or something like that. Right. All of that needs to be coordinated, right?
Right. And also with coordination, you mentioned earlier law enforcement. So how should you work with law enforcement to let them know that there's like this thing that's going to look like criminal activity happening, which you don't want to tell the police department, just ignore anything that's like criminal activity at my company, but you also don't want to tell them, well, on Wednesday night, we're having these guys come and show up and stop them.
Yeah, I'd love to hear comments on this podcast from others that do this, on how they manage that. I have not in my career involved law enforcement unless we are breaching a facility that is tied to the government or law enforcement, right? So we break in we do some work for government agencies. So we break into a government agency building. Yeah, generally we tell law enforcement because they're usually monitoring those places, and we don't want to get shot. But we went and we broke into a couple banks. We didn't call the local cops and say, hey, by the way, on this night, we're going to be breaking into this bank, so don't come by and, don't shoot us. I've never done that. And I just feel like that would be like a setup for failure, because now they're going to be sitting in the parking lot and it's not going to be realistic, whatever. But we did do a couple of jobs with some government agencies, and because the facilities that we were going to be getting into are protected by the police, the local police, we did say, can you let them know? And they did. Right. So I guess it depends on the job, I would say. And it also depends on the country you're going to. Right. Ryan and I did a job in the country of Jamaica, and the company even told us, like, yeah, we're just not going to tell law enforcement because that can go really bad for you. So we didn't, we avoided telling law enforcement for that reason.
And I would think also part of the test for the company is to see what is the law enforcement response time. So now they know that if it's going to take law enforcement 30 minutes to get there versus 4 minutes, that's probably a different level of security that they need to be thinking about.
Yeah. And I think it depends on how much they are expecting that the cops will get there. Like let's say a private company would probably have a security system. So let's say tied to ADT or whatever their security system is. And that system should be the one that notifies the police if there's an alarm that hasn't been shut off. right? So if that alarm's going off for 30 seconds and they call the security guy, because I don't think that's a false alarm. Now the cops get deployed. How quick, like you said, how quickly do they react? I think that's that is an important detail, to know. And also, since we are doing red teaming, we're testing all of those protocols. Like, does your alarm go off? Were we able to bypass it? Were we able to stop it? So what kind of security did you have that should have stopped someone from entering your building at night?
And I think some of what you were also just talking about is a little bit referring to goals of the pen test. What are typically some of the things that clients are going to want you to do, or like I often refer to as like, what are the crown jewels of the company? Or sometimes I'll ask, what would be the worst thing if it were to show up on the front page of the New York Times tomorrow that, hackers got this? What is this for your company? Yeah. And I would imagine that some of those can be interesting, where maybe it's just get access into the CEO's office, sit at their desk, or maybe other things that could potentially be more extreme. What are some things that a client should think about for what are the goals of this?
Yeah, access is important, but access alone, and I'm going to talk about companies first. Access alone isn't always what they're concerned about. It's if you got access. So if I got access to your lobby, how dangerous is that? I don't know if I can tell you that without doing more, which is, can I then sit at a network plug and plug a device in? Does that allow me access to your network from the lobby? If that's true, well, that's something that needs to be fixed, right? Mm-hmm. So they have to think about, like, once access is gained, or if access is gained, then what do you want to prove or not prove? And usually with a company, the question is, can you exfiltrate data? Can you steal something of value, or can you disrupt business? Right. So, and not that they want us to actually do any of that, but could we get to a point, like, could we be sitting in the NOC in the server room with a picture of us in there and unsupervised, and we could have just started ripping network plugs out, or we could have started exfiltrating data? Could we have gotten to, the facilities part of the plant or something and shut it all down and stop production, stop the conveyor belts from running, right? Could we have done that? So they don't want us to actually go in and do it many times. They want us to get to the point to where, like, we're putting a sticky note or a challenge coin or a card, a business card or something saying, hey, we were here, with a picture. And that way they know, hey, yeah, you guys could have done something. Now, when it comes to the government agencies that we work with, a lot of times we're simulating what would be a terror attack, right? So we're not doing it. No one dies, but the purpose is much different, right? So we're getting, could we have poisoned your people? Could we have put a bomb somewhere and blown it up? Could we have gained access and actually hurt or killed people that you are in charge of at the building, or that, are part of the citizenship of where you are? So the goals usually are much different when it comes to working with, like, government agencies than it does with corporate people. But although, they can have the same goals, because, usually a lot of times too with government agencies, they want us to get in and see, like, could you have access to network? And then when you do, could you have then done something really horrible? So this, similar, but let's say the stakes are higher when you're talking about, like, terror activity versus non-terror activity.
Yeah, I think it's probably important for them to think about what is the purpose of their existence as either a company or as a government entity. Because, like you were just saying, if it's a government entity that is critical infrastructure, it could be something as simple as flipping a switch and that critical infrastructure stops working, or sit down at a computer somewhere, at a SCADA device, and send a command that turns it off. And if that is, who knows, whatever type of critical infrastructure for a region, a state, a county, that could be a big deal, versus maybe, like you were talking about earlier, Twitter, Toyota, stealing intellectual property. Right. That could be a big deal. Or stealing their research that isn't out there yet. That could be a big deal. Shutting them down, sure, for, like we talked about, MGMCs, or shutting them down is a huge deal. But maybe stealing money from them could be a bigger deal. It really depends on, why do you exist? What is your purpose?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important point, right? And as an attack simulation, that's kind of our job, not theirs, the clients, to tell them, here's what we think we should be trying based on what we know about your organization. here's what we think should be the goals. And sometimes they'll go, yeah, that's great. I like that. I didn't think about that. Or they'll go, no, we really want you to do this. Right. So, but I think that, as the attack simulators, we're supposed to kind of help them along that path to determine what it is that they want to do.
And there are probably times you can even go to them and say, hey, is it okay if we try this because we noticed something? So can we do that sort of thing?
Yeah, that happens. Like I said, once you're doing the OSINT, that happens often to us, like where you're in the middle of the OSINT and you see something. And, we had that happen on one job. We were doing OSINT and we found that there was going to be this groundbreaking ceremony that just so happened to be on this certain month. So we called the client and said, oh, we would love to be able to come out during the groundbreaking ceremony and make believe we're reporters to see if we can get on the site unsupervised. Would you allow for that to happen? And because we found that OSINT, they were really excited and okay with letting us do that. So that worked out pretty good. But yeah, that we didn't know that beforehand, right? We found that during our OSINT phase, and that changed a lot of stuff for us.
And one of the other things that I remember from my network pen testing days and web app pen testing days is having to explain to clients how little vulnerabilities can add up. And does that same thing happen here where you find 5, 6, 7 different things and the client's just like, yeah, each of those by themselves is no big deal. And you're like, okay, but what if we can compromise this and then go to here and then this step? Like, how often does that sort of thing happen as well?
I mean, that's a good point. Because I don't think we've had a client that ignored the little things because you can clearly point out like, hey, if A didn't happen, then we couldn't have got to B, which got us to C. So all of those little things kind of added up to be major breach, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then there's sometimes though, there's things that aren't fixable. We were just talking to a client the other day who was explaining a breach that they went through a bit ago. And it started with a SIM swapping attack. Mm-hmm. And they were asking like, what do we do to protect from that? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question, right? Like that vulnerability was with your cell phone provider. Yep. They fell for it. Like, what could you have done? So, I said, like, I'll give you one idea just because you're asking for an idea. But if you know that you're with T-Mobile, right? And they got breached. So we saw that. So you're with T-Mobile, then that's a good time to check with T-Mobile. You're with T-Mobile, they got breached. That's a good time to check with them. Are there any second factor protocols you have that we can put in place so nobody can make changes to my account without this password, right? Mm-hmm. And see if they have that. And if they don't, I'm not saying leave, but you better figure out what's going to happen if your phone gets swapped. What occurs? In the case of like what we do at our company, we don't use SMS for anything. So if they swap my SIM, it would suck for me. I'd have to go get my number back. But they're not getting text messages for passwords. We use apps and other things for our second factor auth, right? So we don't. That company, they happen to use SMS still for their second factor auth. So when that phone got swapped, it was impossible for them to protect against that. So sometimes there is no answer, right? Mm-hmm. But you say, look, that little thing, being able to swap a SIM, was big only because you still used SMS, which seems like a small thing. But then that little thing allowed us to take over that account, which then allowed us network access. And that's how we breached your whole life. Right. So you have to kind of build the picture for the client with the little things so they see how big it really is.
And I also think that there's times when the client really thinks that they have a fortress from the outside. And they think that we have this really crunchy outside, but then they don't realize that once you get in, it's all free reign, soft and squishy on the inside. Is that something that you see happen a lot, that once you can breach that first outer layer, that there really are no other defenses on the inside?
I shouldn't say, I won't say I see it often. There's no other defenses. I think part of our job, and you know this from doing them, is more like because a lot of people have spent a lot of time on their firewalls, money and things like that protecting. It's not like you walk in and it's a wet paper bag. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of that maybe they didn't think like the attacker. So they didn't think that, that front desk didn't need admin privileges to everything. or that coffee pot that, and this is a true story, that coffee pot that they bought that can, that the secretary can turn on from her phone, that was on the network with administrative privileges. Why, right? And they didn't think through that. So it's not that the network was like Swiss cheese. It was just that, wow, we had this situation where, they didn't think through all of it. And now we found that vulnerability. And that's really what we're there for. Now, of course, if we walked in and everything was just wide open because, that's the way they had it, that would be a big tell. But nowadays, like in the, last few years, and I can't speak for every company, but at least the clients we have, the people we work with, I haven't seen like that level of, oh my God, this is terrible. But people do put a lot of weight into their external security. And I think that does make a lot of people feel like, well, we're really good because look at all this stuff out here. We got barbed wire fences. We got RFID. We got double door locks. We got man traps. We got cameras everywhere. We got security guards. So we have all of that. So they go, well, we're really good. Right. So they may feel a little more relaxed, because of that, and that relaxing could maybe make them make some mistakes on the network.
And I think you also just kind of referred to some of those external defenses, which, I like to compare to our backups and restores, where I've seen multiple times where companies think we're all good with backups and restores because we back everything up, so we'll be good. And then the one time they need the restore, they finally realize the tapes can't be restored. So I think there's probably a similarity here where they think that we have our cameras, we have all this going on, we have these protections in place, but is anybody watching the video on the camera? Are the cameras recording? Are the cameras overwriting? How frequently are they overwriting? These seem to be all things that are ripe for review as well.
That's a really, really good point, because I think that is something that tests often reveal, is that are there verification steps for the things that you think are secure, right? Like, I mean, you're telling a true life story, right? How we were in that place and there was cameras everywhere and we thought, oh no, we're up the creek, we're caught. And then when no one's coming, we're like, okay, wait, what's happening? And then 20 minutes later, an hour later, 2 hours later, and we're still there. And I'm like, they must be unmanned. And that's what we found out, was that they had all cameras everywhere, but they were completely unmanned. So they only looked at it if there was a reason, like if there was a breach, then they went, oh man, we got to go check the cameras of what happened. So yeah, they had stuff that made us wonder if we were about to get caught. But then, 2 hours later when we weren't, we're like, yeah, that must have not been great. So the same with, like, I love the analogy you gave with backup tapes. Yeah, we've seen that a lot. Companies like, yeah, we do backups. We do them all the time. No one verified that the backup's been secure. No one verified that it's actually being done, that it's up to date. And all of a sudden some breach happens and they're like, great, go get the backups. And they're like, oh, the last one that worked was 8 months ago. And it's like, oh no. And, that's a really, really crappy time to find out that your backup schema was not working. So, so I think that's good advice by you.
In these days of ransomware, that's something that you really need to make sure, because when your machines get all locked up and you don't want to pay that ransom, if you can just restore to something somewhat recent, you're going to be in a much better place.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's one of the things we hear a lot from customers who have, or people, any company that has suffered because of ransomware, is that they wish that they put more effort and attention into their backup schema. And it's such a poor time to wish that everything was better as after you get slapped with some ransomware. So definitely, if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm not sure, then that's one thing you want to go hit pause on this, go check, then come back and go, whoo, kind of thing.
So I got a little story here for you that's a little bit about the culture of security and being able to encourage your people, your employees, to also have this culture of security. There was a company that I used to work for many years ago, and one of the rules that we had at the company was that all employees, while inside the building, must have their employee badge displayed. So that way we could easily pick out who are the employees, at least, based on which one of their badge. And if you don't have the badge displayed, the assumption is they're not an employee. And if they're not escorted, they need to be escorted by somebody or brought to security. So that was kind of the rule, was that everybody needed to have the badge exposed. And it was also highly encouraged to stop anybody that you don't see wearing a badge. It was not a bad thing to stop somebody. And I remember we would, my team was one of the ones that would go in during the new hire orientation and explain this to people, since we were part of the security team. We said, if you see anybody within this building that doesn't have our company employee badge publicly visible, stop them and ask, who are you? And can I see your badge? That you will never get in trouble for that. And the story that comes out of this is one of those new hires left that orientation meeting. That same day, they were walking down the hall and they saw this person not having a badge exposed. And they were like, hi, can I see your employee badge? And the person had this big smile on his face. And he said, yes, absolutely. You did the right thing. You stopped me, pulled out the badge, and it had his name and the title CEO on it. So this is a great thing to encourage your people to support this, just so when there's people like you and me roaming around in a building, maybe we'll figure out how to get a badge and put it up. Maybe we won't. But if we get stopped and we don't have that badge, that's a great inside squishy security defense that's going to be happening there as well.
And then you have to add one more thing to that, for if you like that suggestion that Patrick just gave, which is, now you need to instruct your employees that when they leave for lunch, to not have that badge exposed, because that's how guys like us either clone them or get pictures or whatever, so we can go make one. So yes, inside your doors, I agree. I think it's a great suggestion, but you got to make sure you follow up with that. And hey, just turn those things around when you're not there.
I think one of the last questions or topics that I have for you is another kind of comparison, or a little phrase that I often like to use. Like, it doesn't make any sense to put a $100 lock on a $10 bike. And I got to think that you run into some of these things as well, where, you can look at a whole facility, you can be like, all right, so you need infrared cameras over here, and you need these high level fencing, you need electrical fencing, you need people constantly walking around. They're like, do you know what that's going to cost? That's far more than our company's worth. So is this something that they should also be thinking about, is, how much security should they really have in place? Because we always say the only secure computer is the one that's smashed up in a million pieces and dropped to the bottom of the ocean. There's always going to be some degree of risk against the adversaries getting access. So what do they really need to think about, how far and how much that they do need to invest in that security?
That's a really, I think that's an impossible question to answer for everybody. Okay. In my opinion, I think just because the answer depends, right? Yep. Like, I'll give you what was coming to my mind when you were asking that. We worked with a company that was dead set. They wanted phishing and vishing in their test, their adversarial simulation. So, we start doing the work, and we start doing OSINT. Can't find one phone number. I mean, just not one public phone number. So we go back and we're like, hey, we're after like working on it for tons of hours, and they said, oh yeah, we don't. Our employees only use the chat. I said, then why do you want phishing? Like, you don't use phones. Like, if all you have is internal lines and everyone uses their cell phone, what are you looking for phishing for, right? And so it was like an example to me of like misplacing the security services. So people can do that when it comes to also how they secure. Spending a $500,000 on your firewall and your IDS and IPS systems, but then not filtering out external emails or not having a virus scanner, stupid, right? So saying I have this facility that is super high end and it needs to stay secure, and if someone breaks in, a lot of people could die. And then you protect it with a master lock, with a gaping hole in the fence, right? That's not great, right? I mean, so I think you have to, like, for the company, you have to kind of sit back and say, the what if, right? So what happens if we were to get breached? And now, how serious is that? And that should determine at what level you start applying physical security, camera security, network security, all that stuff, right? Because security can also be an endless money pit. And I don't say that. I mean, we're in it. So it's hard to even say that out loud without sounding like I'm trying to be the worst salesperson on earth. But people can continually spend and still be not secure. So you have to find that balance between how much you put into physical, how much you put into training, how much you put into security awareness, how much you put into network. And you got to find that balance. And that balance can only be found by truly understanding what your risk is. That's what I think. I don't know, what do you think?
I agree that there's not going to be any specific answer that we can just give. And I'm sure the easy answer is whatever my budget is. But I think there's probably also CTOs, CSOs out there who have an idea of what is the cost of a breach, what is the likelihood of that breach, and then doing some kind of calculation of the percentage of likelihood against what's the cost, and then using that amount of money as the defense is probably some of the things that I've heard with that. And if you can get more, great, keep going with it. I think there's like so many other topics, but we don't want to keep people too long with these types of things. I think it's an interesting, I'm glad you picked this one. It's an interesting topic to discuss, and I think it's important. And since the end of the pandemic, we are seeing a big uptick in people asking for physical. I mean, just in the last couple of months, we've done like 2 or 3 of them, right? So we're seeing that uptick in that, and people going, yeah, I think I really do need, we had this whole like everyone working from home. Now people are coming back to work, and they kind of forgot like how to be secure in a building. I think people in this country too are also very worried about the gun violence, seeing an increase in that. So they're starting to really think a lot more seriously about, oh man, my building, how easy is it to get in and out of? So I think this is an important topic. So, people can point to this episode and say, well, here's some things you might want to think about if you're planning on a red team or an SE team. Yeah, I think that would be great if other people have their own suggestions or questions about this, to hit us up on Slack, LinkedIn, any of these social types of places. It'd be great to hear from people. Yeah,
do that and put them in the comments in the comments of the podcast, like on YouTube or LinkedIn when we post it. We should start a dialogue around that, because I'd love to hear what others in the industry or others in the companies even think about what they do to prepare when they're having an SE team or a red team test. So thanks, Patrick. I'm not even going to ask. Okay. So all I'm going to say is thank you, everyone, for joining us this month. And next month, we're going to get another topic that Patrick will not tell us about until next month. So you'll have to tie in to find out what it is.
But no, I was actually going to tell everybody what it was going to be about. No, you weren't. I was, believe it or not. You want to try?
Okay, Patrick, what's it about?
All right.
Oh, no, I hate you. No, I hate you. No, I know it. I hate you already.
So for next month, I know I never say what next month is, but so next month is going to be November. Next month, we will release this at the end of November. And one of the things that happens at the end of November is usually Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Lots of people start doing shopping. And one of the things that we see is lots of online scams. So I figured let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about some of these scams that you can be aware of that frequently happen, especially Cyber Monday, some of the phishing ways that you can look out for these types of things. And then I think even in future months, maybe even December, we're going to have a topic that I don't know if you recognized it, Chris, but this shirt's even a little bit of a hint what we might be talking about.
I expected to see some of the other things you brought home, but I can't believe it, guys and gals. We got 2 topics from Patrick. I don't know what's happening. He might be sick. We're going to send a doctor to his house soon as we're done with this podcast.
Awesome.
But
appreciate it.
But I think, I think it's good that topic for November, December is a hot one. Scams go through the roof that time of year, every year, and it doesn't seem to get any better. So, I think that's some good topics coming up. We look forward to it. So until then, everyone, stay safe, stay secure. See you.